Back here on CBS Sports HQ, we already checked off the AFC North draft needs. So now let's get to the NFC North, shall we? So Vegas, they like the Lions to win the division, and they're going to try to find some success after losing both their OC and DC after Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn moved on to be head coaches elsewhere. The Vikings, what are they going to do about the quarterback position and Sam Darnold? The Packers, the latest news there, they're shopping Jair Alexander. So is that the direction they're going to go in the draft? And then finally, the Ben Johnson era begins in Chicago. Bears fans hoping that him and Caleb Williams can get the Bears back into the playoffs. And we have BMAC and John Breech back with us here on HQ to discuss, and we're starting with the long shot in the division. That is the Chicago Bears. And gentlemen, they have their quarterback of the future, Ben Johnson, hopefully their head coach of the future. They have some weapons on offense there for Caleb Williams. But Breech, what is the need that is at the top of their list for the draft in your opinion?
Well, I will say that no matter how brilliant of an offense Ben Johnson designs, it is not going to work if Caleb Williams doesn't have any time to throw. And that's kind of what the problem was in Chicago last season. So they need offensive linemen. Caleb Williams got sacked 68 times, which was tied for the third most in NFL history. Probably should be eligible for workers' comp when you're getting beat up like that often. I mean, it was just didn't have any time to throw. So when you look around at what the Bears need to do, whether it's an offensive guard, whether it's an offensive tackle, they do have some options because they're not limited by position. They have several starting offensive linemen from last season hitting free agency. You have Coleman Shelton, Tevin Jenkins, Matt Pryor. So you're going to be able to start from scratch if you're the Bears and kind of pick who you want on the offensive line. And you look at this list, there is a good chance with the Bears picking at 10th overall that one of these guys at the top, whether it's Kelvin Banks Jr., whether it's Will Campbell, will fall down to them. So I will be surprised if the Bears do anything but the offensive line, but I think that's absolutely where they need to start with that 10th overall pick.
I'm right there with you, John. John, you know how bad your offensive line got to be. If you had a mobile quarterback and he was sacked 68 times, we're talking about a quarterback that actually can move and make people miss. And he did that throughout his rookie campaign, but the pocket just collapsed so fast. At times, he just stood there and he got sacked 68 times. He was basically sacked 4 times a ball game. That's what they allowed for the Chicago Bears. So when you look at, yes, having Ben Johnson, one of the more creative offensive minds that we've seen in quite some time, if their offensive line is not together, good luck. It will not be successful. It won't be happy time. So I'm right there with you. The O-line is the only direction to go for the Chicago Bears.
Seems like there might be one direction to go for the Green Bay Packers as well. News coming down within the last 24 hours that the Packers are now shopping their veteran corner in Jair Alexander. So, BMAC, no surprise, a corner is a need for you there.
No question. I mean, when you look at being, 23rd in the first round, picking 23rd for the Green Bay Packers, they will have a nice list of players to pick from to add to their defense at the cornerback position. You talked about Jair Alexander. It sounded like they're really adamant about moving on from him. So you got to go ahead and replace Jair Alexander. A.Z. Thomas is the name for me. Outstanding career there at Florida State. Went to the Senior Bowl, was outstanding once again in coverage. He was sound throughout the entire week, and he provides the element of size and length to the Green Bay Packers, and that was something that they were missing, especially when they moved on from Rasul Douglas. So being able to add a guy like AZ really helps their defense, because I can tell you this much, in the NFC North, when you're seeing Roma Duze, DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, J-Mo Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all twice a year, you better have sound guys in the back end that can play sticky coverage and, most importantly, become playmakers for your defense. And AZ will provide that for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, BMAC. It's not just Jair Alexander who they're looking to move on, but Eric Stokes probably going to leave in free agency. So now you have this huge hole at the cornerback spot. And so that does seem like the route they should go with that 23rd overall pick. And another name out there, Jahdae Barron, we saw the list of guys they could take. But the other thing is, sometimes when you're picking 23rd overall, you don't always have the guy you want fall into your lap. You might circle someone on your draft board, and then all of a sudden they're not there. So it was interesting to hear Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst talk at the Combine and kind of talk about how he wants his team to get better at getting after the quarterback. So maybe getting a pass rusher or a defensive lineman wouldn't be too surprising to see Green Bay go that route. Who knows? If Josh Jacobs is in charge of the draft, draft board, then they might go after a #1 wide receiver because he was out during Super Bowl week saying that this team needs a top-tier receiver. But I do think cornerback is the route to go for Green Bay.
Well, let's go over to the Vikings because they still have a lot to figure out in terms of the quarterback. What are they going to do with Sam Darnold? Are they going to hand the keys over to J.J. McCarthy? But Breech, similar to the Packers, the need here is also at corner.
Yeah, you know what? It is. It's cornerback for me, but the Vikings are picking 24th overall, one spot behind the Packers. So the Packers might snatch the guy they want. But if you look at what Minnesota is dealing with right now, Byron Murphy, Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, all cornerbacks about to hit free agency. So they have to fill those holes. And I think taking a cornerback in the first round would be the smart thing to do for Minnesota.
I'm right there with you. You talked about potential run on cornerbacks. We just had slated the Green Bay Packers selecting A.Z. Thomas. Benjamin Morris could be available for the Minnesota Vikings right behind the Green Bay Packers. And I think that's a quality name to kind of monitor. Season ended prematurely for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. But when you look at what he did throughout his career, they're very, very sticky coverage, plays with great sound eyes, and he potentially could be a day one starter for the Minnesota Vikings to the names that you mentioned in terms of free agency for the Vikings. So all three of those guys that you mentioned, Shaq Griffin, Gilmore, and Byron Murphy, all three will not be back. You know what I mean? So hopefully they get Byron Murphy back, but they will still need some shoes to be filled, and Benjamin could potentially be able to do that.
All right, finally, we're going to talk about the Detroit Lions, a team that was bit hard by the injury bug last season. Now they have to figure out what life is like post Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. What needs do they have to address in the draft, John?
Yeah, you look at what happened to them. Their defense fell apart down the stretch. And yeah, there were injuries that were a part of it, but I think their two biggest issues were they did not get any pass rush after Aiden Hutchinson went down. I mean, he went down in October, and he still led the team in sacks for the entire season. And then you look at their secondary. They're probably going to need some cornerback help with Carlton Davis possibly leaving. So now you think you're Detroit. I don't think you can really go wrong if you take a defense player, whether it is a pass rusher or a cornerback. And the thing is, if you take a pass rusher, you don't have to worry about getting involved in the Myles Garrett sweepstakes. So you don't have to worry about paying a guy like Myles Garrett or giving up the draft compensation they would take to get someone like him. And if they do go with a pass rusher, maybe you get Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. You have Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. But picking at 28th overall, getting a corner could be tough because, as we just mentioned, Packers and Vikings also looking at corners. So you might be stuck with like the 8th best corner in the draft at 28th overall.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Defensive line, edge rusher is the way to go when you look at the depth or the lack thereof. Aiden Hutchinson, season-ending injury. Marcus Davenport was dealing with injuries the entire season. You brought in Zadarius Smith. He didn't give you the spark that you needed to have, but finding a way to add more significant depth at that position really helps the entire defense. They addressed the cornerback room last year when you look at getting Terry Arnold and Rakestraw, but you still need to find a way to get quality guys that can put relentless pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And when you talk about this division, once again, John, I do believe the NFC North will be one of the more competitive divisions in the National Football League. So life won't get any easier for the Detroit Lions. So finding a guy like Nick Scorton would definitely do wonders for their defense in terms of 3 levels, helping every level out, not to mention what he can provide in run support.
And just a reminder, we have a full list of those prospect rankings over on CBSSports.com right now. B-Mac, Breech, we certainly appreciate it. Talking draft needs for not only the AFC North, but the NFC North as well. Getting a look at the odds to win the Super Bowl among the NFC North teams. Of course, the Lions. That's what Vegas likes, up top at +950, followed by the Packers, the Vikings, and the Bears at 41-1.